Episode 3, the 6th of November 2019. Immigration is really hard. It's hard. It's not easy to do. I say that as someone who's been an immigrant now twice in my life in different jurisdictions. I've faced American laws, Canadian laws, and now Austrian laws, and it's tough. It's not easy. And it's not just about the system, it's the physical act itself. Moving to another country is likely one of the toughest things that someone can do. It's very far removed in the American experience for a lot of people because it was their ancestors who actually immigrated, who got on ships, who were able to survive the journey and finally made it to ports of entry and were finally able to gain access to the country. They were able to find work, start businesses, and they became integrated over time. It's tough. The process that exists now in many Western liberal democracies is actually very difficult for people to immigrate. It's already pretty tough, and a lot of the proposals that people talk about just sounds like they want to make it even tougher. And I think that's one of the biggest issues, and another is that we always focus on the extremes. There's always these cases of particular people who might have been illegal, who committed some terrible act, and someone has gotten hurt, or God forbid, they've been killed. And these things do happen as they happen with native-born people. But if we're going to be passing an entire legislation for hundreds of millions of people based upon the acts of one or two, that's very problematic. And in that net that you're hoping to cast, you're going to catch a lot of people who are professionals, who are entrepreneurs, who actually provide way more value than any other native-born person in that society. So we really need to think about that and really emphasize that point. Another one that's brought up is the system is broken. We hear this a lot in the United Kingdom. We hear it in the United States. Even in Canada, there's a good amount of that during the last federal election. You know, is the system broken? Probably not. Is the system hard for ordinary people to meander through? Yes, it's a labyrinth. It's very difficult. Are there bad people getting in? Perhaps. Are there good people getting in? Most likely, or even more so, overwhelmingly. So to talk about the system is broken for immigration is just another rhetorical point. It doesn't really mean anything. There's as much for every bad story of an immigrant, there are probably 900,000 positive ones that you can attach to it. We need to think about the future when travel is going to be way cheaper than it is today, when any kind of labor is going to be way more portable than it is today, if it isn't already. And people are going to be moving around even more. The number of people who take business trips to areas and need visas or need to go somewhere temporarily, this is happening more and more, and I believe the same is going to happen for immigration. We need to go back and start thinking about guest worker policies. We need to think about ways that people can better integrate into countries. It's much easier in immigrant countries such as the United States, the United Kingdom, or Canada, and it's much more difficult, certainly in Asian countries or African countries, but even European countries, it's much more difficult. In my native province in Canada of Quebec, they want to make it even more difficult there. They want to give people a test de valeur, the idea that you need to do some kind of value test before you're allotted into the country. Some people say this is too harsh. I likely agree with that. I think it's not necessary. You don't need to be screening for values when people want to come to your country voluntarily. I think that says enough. And if people are willing to go through the entire process, the labyrinth of immigration, why not? I think that's a very, very important thing. The more we harden our systems, the more we make it more difficult for people to peacefully integrate into a country and move. Again, most people are not moving because they want to cause ill. Most people want to improve their lives. If we harden our systems, we're only hardening the people who apply. And people are not going to be very appreciative of the host country, and it's going to be much harder for them to integrate. We see a lot of problems now with second-generation Turkish populations in Germany, much for this reason. There's a lot of social cohesion arguments that go along with that, but it's very true. And that brings me to the last point, that any talk that you hear now about a crisis of immigration, a crisis at the border, usually this is emblematic of something else. If they say there's a crisis in immigration, there's a crisis at the border, that's what we're seeing. What we're not seeing are the millions of dollars of profits when it comes to gun running and drugs and all the rest. And there are actually better fixes for that. There's the idea of decriminalizing or even legalizing particular drugs. There's the idea of actually opening up the process to make it easier for people who are trying to escape their countries where they're persecuted. And the refugee process should and always will be different than the immigration process. And I think whenever those are mixed, that's very bad. It's bad for you, it's bad for me, and it's bad for any of the bright and brilliant young workers, entrepreneurs, and really dreamers who are trying to make their lives better in another country in another time. I think that's something that we always need to return to. Immigration is hard. It's not easy to do. Most people who talk about it have not been through the process. They don't understand what it's like to be alienated from friends and family and have zero social network and have to try to gain not only a job, not only a status in society, but become integrated and live a normal life. And that's really all we want. That's it for now. Au revoir et à la prochaine.